you a hand with that. So thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. I'm so excited that we have bestselling romance author Mia Sosa here. She's the author of one of my favorite books of 2020, The Worst Best Man, along with a half dozen other really great contemporary romance novels that you should definitely check out. Mia's writing is funny, flirty, and fairly steamy, and her books celebrate our multicultural world. She lives in Maryland with her husband, their two bookaholic daughters, and one dog that rules them all. So thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's so great to see a couple of faces. Hi. Helen, are you one of the winners?
Yes, she is.
Yay! That's awesome. Congratulations.
So we have a bunch of great pre-submitted questions from folks, but if you have questions that come up during this event, just pop them in the chat box, or at the end, I'll set it up so you can unmute yourselves and talk to Mia directly. So we'll just kick it off here.
Sounds good.
So have you always wanted to be a writer? Can you share some stories from your journey to becoming a published author?
Okay, so I don't know that I saw myself as a writer in the way that I am a writer now. I don't think that I envisioned a world in which I would be writing books. What I did envision at one point was that I would be a journalist, and that I would be doing investigative news stories. And in high school, I worked for one of the externships that I did in high school was to work with an organization called New Youth Communications, and they put out a newspaper, and I did stories for that. And I, really thought that was what I was going to do until I got to college, and I don't know, I kind of lost the spark for journalism. So short answer is, yes, I envisioned myself doing some writing. Did I think that I was going to be a romance author? Absolutely not. And it has been a ride getting here. So I started the journey to being a writer in about 2014. So I haven't been doing this very long. Before then, I was practicing law and practiced law in the Washington, D.C. area for about a decade. So when I decided to leave the practice of law, I thought, well, I'm going to take a step back and figure out what I want to do next. And I thought that take a step back was going to be, maybe a couple of years, and literally 6 months in, I was like, okay, I've got to figure out what I'm going to do. And in that time, I was reading a lot of romance, and I'd always been a romance reader since, probably about 14, 15 years old. But I started to read in that time off in earnest. And then I thought, you know what? I have been writing sort of first chapters of these stories that I envisioned as couple-driven romances, even though I didn't know what it was that I was doing, and they really didn't have any plots. And then I thought, well, why don't I actually try to learn something about the craft of writing romance and see if it's something that I would like to do. And once I started to read books about the craft of romance, once I joined Romance Writers of America, and once I started to meet other writers in the romance community, I was pretty much sold on the idea of this being my next career. So that's how I got here. And one of my great friends, I will share this with you as one of the stories. I met one of my great friends. Her name is Olivia Dade. You may know her as the author of, spoiler alert, and the upcoming All the Feels. She is one of the most fantastic people in the world. But I was looking for a critique partner, somebody who would look at my work before I published it, before I sent it out to publishers for possible publication. And I did that through an RWA forum. And I was asking around, and another writer responded and said, I'm interested, let's chat offline. That person never followed up. And Olivia contacted me and said, I know I saw that exchange, but I'm still gonna inquire. And thank goodness she did, because it started this great friendship. And we have been kind of a part of each other's publishing journey ever since. So that was 2014. We met in San Antonio at our first Romance Writers of America conference together. And so it's kind of indicative, I think, of some of the wonderful parts of the romance community, which is that you can make these wonderful connections with people.
That's so incredible. I love that.
And we still laugh about it. We're like, where is that other author? She never followed up with me.
Writing is a small world. All industries are.
I think it all worked out the way that it was supposed to.
I think it's going quite well from our perspective anyway. What can you share about your writing process? What are your favorite and least favorite parts?
Least favorite part is writing the first draft. I think there are a lot of people who kind of, they're really excited about the first draft, and they're kind of like, this is where I'm going to like put all the ideas. And for me, it's the most daunting, because I love the revision process. I love kind of taking what I have, which I know is like a word salad, and then turning it into the book that ultimately will be published. So for me, it's tough, because a lot of times I have so many ideas that I want to put on the page, but you really can't. And so to me, the writing that first draft can be like this kind of, it's herding cats, and I'm just kind of like, oh, and I'm like squirrel, oh, I gotta do this, and that part is not conducive to like actually getting something that is compelling. And interesting. It is sort of everything. And so what I enjoy is kind of getting to the point where I've decided, okay, here is the framework. And now I'm going to go in and kind of fix individual scenes, or figure out kind of where the characters pivot, or, kind of really dig into what their flaws are and those kinds of things. So that's the part of the process that I love the most. And the first draft is the part I really don't enjoy.
So more of a spontaneous than a planning everything out in advance sort of situation.
So I have described myself as a plantser, as opposed, so there are some people who are plotters, and they will not start a book without having like figured out the entire plot and work from an outline. And then there are people who are what we call pantsers, and they write by the seat of their pants. And that is neither one of those is me. So I'm sort of in the middle, where I have a sense of kind of, what's the premise of the book? What's driving the book? What's going on with these people? What are their backstories? Why are they the way they are? I like to know that before I start writing a story. I usually have some sense of what in romance, what we call the Black moment will look like, the point where all seems lost and these two are not going to be together. I have a sense of what that looks like. I have a sense of kind of themes, things that I want to get across in my book. And then the sort of, there's a lot of meandering in the spaces in between. I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was
There you
typing
go.
in the chat box, and so then the spacebar trick didn't work.
No problem.
We had a question come in the chat that matches up with the list here about
Okay.
how you're so creative, and where do you find inspiration for your character, for your stories, and how do you get your characters to be so realistic?
Okay, that's a great question. So this is a question that is very similar to a question that I often get, which is, do you think of yourself as kind of naturally funny? And I tell people often that I'm not naturally funny. What I tell people is that I live funny. And because I live funny and the people around me do ridiculous things, I take that as inspiration and then run with it. Or I have people who are, I have a lot of people in my life who are larger than life personalities. And because of that, I cannot help sort of saying like you, and not that person specifically, but sort of their personality traits would make a great, female main character or a male, main character, and or a secondary character. And so I look to kind of the things that happen around me. A lot of times there are lines in my book that are things that my husband has said to me, and he's the true comedian in our family. And so it finds itself in there. And he is also someone who reads my stories before they're published. He does not consider himself like a first reader, but he's always like, I want to read it before it comes out, which is always great. But then he always recognizes like, hey, that was my joke. But yeah, so there are those kinds of things where I just kind of take the things that are happening around me and I just kind of pump them up a little bit for entertainment. And the realistic part is, I think that honestly, writing my books is a bit of therapy. There is always a bit of kind of me, not necessarily working through my issues, but having worked through my issues, wanting to kind of share what I've learned now that I've worked through them. And so, as an example, with The Worst Best Man, Lena has this sort of public facade, and she wants to appear a particular way, and she understands kind of the consequences of how she is perceived by others. And because she is Black and Latina and all of the things that are associated with how women are perceived in the workplace, all of that stuff is sort of part of her experience. And all of that is part of my experience as well. So, Lena isn't me, but many of the issues that she lives with as a character are things that I have gone through. And I think that's what makes it seem more realistic or more relatable. And also because I've experienced it, and I know I'm not the only person experiencing that, it makes it relatable for readers, because a lot of readers, know precisely, particularly my readers, not all of them are women, but many of them are women. And those readers know what it is like to not be taken seriously in the workplace, or to be perceived as overly emotional and all of those things. And I think that makes it understandable for people.
That trick just is not working, so I'm going to have to click and click.
Got it.
But how many drafts do you write before you reach your final draft?
Oh, it depends on the book. I will tell you with the book that is coming out next year, it is called The Wedding Crasher. It is a follow-up to The Worst Best Man. I completely rewrote that book. I wrote a book, did not think it was the right book, and then rewrote it. So, and that book that I rewrote went through several drafts, and then I rewrote that book, and then it went through several drafts, and then it gets to my editor, who then gives me developmental edits, and then I make further revisions, and then I send it back, and then I get another set of developmental edits, and then there's so I mean, by the time the book gets out there, it has been dice sliced, it's probably unrecognizable from the original draft. And that's the part I love. So that part, although it's like taxing, and you're kind of like, this is never going to happen and it's never going to come together, that is the part that I do enjoy.
You are very lucky, because I don't think I could handle that. That sounds so intense.
Well, I think I have an advantage in that regard, because I was a litigator, and when we turned in briefs, that had been worked on by 4 or 5 people, with comments from 4 or 5 people, and I was used to that. I was used to sort of getting feedback and then changing things. I was used to giving feedback and then having people change things, and sort of line editing and all of that stuff. So the process was very familiar to me. This, though, writing romance, it's sort of it's so individual. Like, a lot of times, we would have these briefs when I was practicing, and there would be sections, and I would take a section and another attorney would take another section. And so it was kind of all of us kind of coming together and creating this thing. And now this is me and the people who review it and give me feedback, who are fantastic. I have fabulous beta readers who read my stuff and give me feedback. And then I have an excellent editor who steers me in the right direction without stifling my voice. And then, then I've got all of the people at Avon who are part of the production team, who then review it many, many times. And then it gets out there. So I have a lot of help.
You've kind of already answered this question, but do you let friends or family read your work before it is done? And is that ever awkward due to the racier content?
So I don't have anyone in my family other than my husband read my books beforehand. And it's not because of the racier content or anything. I just think timing wise, I never am able to get it to them at a time when I'm going to be able to get their feedback. And I wonder, like, I don't know. I do have one cousin who has read stuff in advance, and she loves the racier stuff, so it's never an issue. And my husband, it's like, he doesn't, he's not fazed by it at all. And for the beta readers, my beta readers are romance readers. And so, and they are romance readers who have, I believe, as to all of them, they have all been beta readers for every single one of my books, except for the first one. So, so I've been working with them for a long time, and I trust them to give me feedback and to be honest about any issues that I might have with the book.
That's wonderful. Do you have any writing rituals or ways you get through days when writing doesn't come very easily?
Honestly, sometimes I just veg out. I think sometimes I can find myself in my office, which is where I am right now, and really trying and forcing myself to write when I probably shouldn't be. I'm not in the right mindset. And so those are the days where I get out of the office and I kind of, hang out, take a walk, spend time with my family, get on the couch and just watch TV, something that gets my mind off of the writing so that I can return to it fresh. And I do have one ritual that I hadn't realized I was doing until my husband pointed it out, which is that I get, for every book that I've written, I get a different hoodie. And it's become my writing hoodie. So it's the hoodie that I wear when I am sitting at my desk. And now now that I'm cognizant of it, I feel like, I have to get another hoodie if I'm starting a new story. It feels like it's just the right thing. So that's my ritual now.
If you were ever to revisit the characters from a book, would you put on that hoodie from that book?
Probably not. Maybe, I don't know. Let's see. Like if I were to do maybe a novella revisiting, maybe. I think for that, I think I probably would, just because it feels like that's the right thing to do. But I very rarely return to my characters. I kind of am that person who likes to create a world and then move on to the next set of characters.
Let them enjoy their happy ending.
Yes. And also sometimes I think people envision things, and readers specifically, and I don't want to interfere with that. And it's really interesting. At some point, I believe it had to have been around Valentine's Day, because I got, I think someone tagged me on Twitter, a reader tagged me on Twitter and said, I'm just randomly thinking about Max and Lena and wondering what they're doing today. And I was like, I have no idea, because they're not real. But it's such a lovely thing that for many of my readers, these characters are alive for them, and they think about what they're doing now, and how they're doing. And to me, what's really lovely about that is that it tells me that the story affected them, and affected them in a positive way. So that's a really nice thing.
This is a great follow-up question. Did you base Lena and Max on anyone real, either their looks or personalities?
Well, as I said before, personality wise, not, Lena is, she's a closed off person, and part of her journey is kind of opening up a bit. I am not a closed off person, but what I did base what I did base Lena on is sort of my experiences in the workplace, and sort of, my persona, my public facing persona versus my private facing persona. And for Max, he wasn't based on anybody. I was trying to think of a person who is so incredibly charming. I think that Max had to be a charming person who was good at his core, and was going to kind of wow readers. And he has, there are people who have said, he is my book boyfriend. And I think it's because, and the reason why I think the story is convincing is because it had to be a person like Max to get Lena out of her shell. And that's why I think it's convincing, because there are personalities that wouldn't work with Lena's, but he was, I thought, a great match for her personality, and somebody who would be able to pull out from her that kind of fun that she was so scared of having.
That makes a lot of sense. The old opposites attract.
Right.
What's your favorite flavor of cake or favorite dessert?
I would say I'm a huge fan of chocolate mousse cake. Like anything that's like a, if it says like triple layer chocolate mousse cake, I'm like sold. I love it. So anything like that, yeah, I'm all over it. And I do like another dessert that I will never turn down is flan, which if anybody doesn't know what flan is, you've probably seen it at like many stores, or but it's basically like a custard pudding, and certainly in Latin American countries is very popular, and it's popular in Brazil, and it's popular in Puerto Rico. And I grew up on that, and I had an aunt who made it all of the time, and it is something that I associate with my childhood and with my connection to her. And so, yeah, I will never turn down flan if somebody makes it. It's not always as good as hers, but I'll still try it.
That was my next question. Did you get her recipe?
My mother has the recipe. So my mother, her sister has the recipe and has now taken over the preparing of the flan. And the next step is to then turn it over to me. But I kind of feel like it's this, I don't think I've earned it yet. Maybe in the next, 5 years or so, but not yet. And she does a really good job. The interesting thing is I have a cousin who was born in Brazil and now lives in the United States. And she, for the last Thanksgiving that our family was able to get together, so that would have been 2019, brought flan, and it wasn't my mother's flan. And that was a thing. And I have to tell you, it was really good. And I think my mother was like, oh, wait a minute, this will not do. So I don't know what's going to happen the next time the family gets together. But I will get the recipe from my mother, just because that's like, it just feels like that is precisely what needs to happen, but it hasn't happened yet.
You'll earn it, I believe.
Right. I'm sure I will. I'm sure.
What actors would you cast for the movie or TV series version of the book?
Oh, I came prepared for that. So let's see if I can. So this is, let's see if I can. Okay. Here is Thomas Boudouin. Does anybody does he look familiar to you? He's a Hallmark actor. Like, he does a lot of Hallmark movies, but he's very charming, very funny. And I think I think the person who plays Max has to have a good sense of comedic timing, and he does, and so I would definitely consider him. Now there is an Afro-Brazilian actress. Her name is Yaya da Costa. She's on Chicago Hope right now, and I think her first splash in the entertainment world was as a contestant on America's Next Top Model, like many years ago. And she very much has that sort of persona that I perceive as Lena, but also I think would have the ability, when she needs to, particularly later in the story, to kind of let loose and be fun.
That is so cool. She is gorgeous. Holy
Oh,
moly.
yeah, she is gorgeous. So,
Um, what do you think of NaNoWriMo? Do you think it's conductive to creativity?
NaNoWriMo. I know a lot of, I've never done it. But I know a lot of people who have participated in it, and it is kind of an excellent way, as I understand it, to kind of jumpstart the writing process and have support, and have the sense that, like, at the end of this process, I will have like a finished product that I can then, make into a fully baked story. And so I think if you are the type of person who needs, a community, in a sort of, not in a sense, I think everybody needs community in some way, but there are people who need a sense of community and the community moving together in order to get something done. And if you are that person, I think NaNoWriMo could be a great way to do that. I know that there are fantastic authors. Alexis Daria is one who was very, very involved in NaNoWriMo before she, and still is, I believe, involved. And that was definitely a place where she honed her craft. And so, she's fantastic. And so if anybody, were to want to emulate her, and I think you should, I would say, she did NaNoWriMo, she's doing great, that, maybe that could happen for you.
1 month just seems way too intense to me, but like, lots of respect for people who can do that.
I think I think it's not a bad thing to try it, and see if you are that person. You may find this doesn't work for me. I am just not that type of person who likes the idea of, like, at the end of this month, I will either have this thing or not, and I will either have succeeded or failed. I don't want to put myself in that position. And so I kind of write on my own timeline. But there are some people who thrive in that environment. And I think there's no one way to write. There's no one way to get things done. And so if this is something that potentially could work for you, I don't see why you wouldn't do it.
Absolutely. Do you have any other advice for anyone who's looking to start becoming a writer?
I would say, taking a step back and thinking about kind of what I did, I would say read books in the genre you want to write in, and get a sense of what it is that people are writing, but also get a sense of the classics, get a sense of, and the reason why I think that's so important is because there is a reason why some books are classics in any genre. And there's a reason why people mention them over and over again. And I think there's something to be learned from that. It may be that the conventions of the time don't match up to, what you might want to write today, but there is something about that story that is enduring. And I think it's important as writers for us to kind of figure out what is it about stories that endure, and is there some aspect of craft that I can glean from that? So, and I also think just kind of getting a sense of what's out there, what's been done, how you can, even if you want to write, I mean, I write these trope-tastic books. I love tropes. And what I try to do is try and, put a spin on those tropes and do something a little bit different with them each time. But you have to know what those tropes are, and you have to know what other people have done in order to put your spin on it, because you might think, I'm putting a spin on this trope and it's already been done. you don't really have something new there. So if you're going for trying to do something new or different or fresh, then I think it's important to kind of know what else is out there and know what other people are gravitating towards. Whether it's because you want to write to market and write to what readers are loving, or if you want to write something completely different. I'm all for people writing whatever they want, whether it's to market or not. But you got to know kind of, where you fit into that space in publishing. So read, and read craft books. I think there are lots of great craft books for writers of all kinds. And so writing writing craft books, and even depending on what it is that you want to do, reading books that are about screenwriting, or reading books that are about, just the 3-act structure. All of those books can help you in your craft.
Well, as a librarian, I'm very much in favor of reading and doing research.
Right.
Both excellent. Oh, we have a chat question. Any specific romance craft books that you can recommend?
Yes, I actually have some here. Let's see. I'm going to go with this. I love to show them just because then you kind of know. Oh, look, I have it open on my desk. Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hayes is a fantastic, and as you can see, very short read. But it is kind of one of those, when I think of sort of enduring craft books that like people mention over and over again, that is one of them. I think that Gwen Hayes is sort of, she sets out the beats of a romance and kind of, and she does it in a way that doesn't feel restricting. She never suggests you have to do things in a particular way, but it's the sort of, here are the things that you at some point in the story will have to hit, and here's where ideally it would be, and how you get there is up to you, but that structure is going to help you to kind of tell a full story. And I think that that's a very effective book. Another book that I really used when I was writing both The Worst Best Man and The Wedding Crasher is Story Genius. And this is, and I'll read to you the subtitle. It's How to Use Brain Science to Go Beyond Outlining and Write a Riveting Novel. And it's really a captivating read, but it basically talks about the ways that our brains are wired to read stories and the things that make stories compelling to readers so that they're unput downable. And a lot of it is kind of figuring out the very basic structure of your story. And it's all about, to me, the thing that I got the most out of is what's driving your character and what's holding them back. And kind of figuring that out at the very beginning and having that kind of be a thread throughout the story. So that, and I think what it does is very early on, the reader knows the character. They may not know everything about the character, but they get a sense of, okay, here is what's going on with this character, and here is what's holding them back. And in the case of a romance, here is the reason why this person does not think that they deserve love, or they don't want to fall in love, or they're never going to seek out love. And knowing that, knowing what's driving them and what's driving their decisions helps you to kind of then avoid, I think, those pitfalls of writing sometimes, which is making your characters do things that are completely inconsistent with their personalities, where somebody, in the maybe in the last third is going, what is this character doing? Like, this is not something that we saw in the first 2/3 of the book. And I think that this craft book really helps you to kind of figure what's driving your character, and what are the things way back when that's kind of the reason why they are the way they are.
Wow, that's like,
yeah, it's a lot. It's but it's, I mean, like the book itself was riveting, and so I was kind of like, well, clearly she knows what she's talking about.
do you have any advice that you would give to a Latina aspiring romance writer who wants to tell Latinx happily ever afters?
I would say, come and join us. There aren't that many of us out there, although we are steadily growing, and it is wonderful to see. I think for a Latina who is interested in telling a romance story, I think just tell the story of your heart. I don't think that there's anything that you have to do other than kind of want to tell a story that says something. And I think sometimes there is this pressure that if you are a person of color, or specifically Latinx, or you are African American, that you have to tell a particular story, that you have to hit certain beats, or that you have to include culture, or you have to do. There is no such requirement. You have to tell a story, and tell a story that is meaningful to you. I think the more meaningful a story is to you, the more it will be meaningful to readers. And it doesn't mean that you have to put yourself on the page and explore all of your issues and, all of that stuff. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I think if the issues that your characters are dealing with are ones that resonate with you as a writer and as a person, then I think that will be reflected in what you write. So I just think, just really focus on kind of what is the story that I want to tell, and what do I want to get across to my readers about this character or about this family. I like to do family focused books. I just think, my life is filled with family, and they're part of my romance. My husband is great friends with my mother, and so I cannot imagine a romance story where, the family isn't involved in some way. And so but that isn't a requirement, but that's just me. And so figuring that out about yourself and kind of what story you want to tell is important. But I also don't think you should feel pressured to have to do any particular thing other than write a story that feels true to you.
You kind of already answered this one, but how do you feel about the Latinx representation in the writing community?
So I feel like I feel that there are fantastic authors out there now. Many of them are probably right behind me on this bookshelf, who I'm so delighted are part of the writing community. I mentioned before Alexis Daria, Priscilla Oliveras, Sabrina Saul. I could go on and on. Adriana Herrera. There is a new author. Her name is Natalie Caña, who has a book that's going to be out in May of 2022 that I'm really excited about, and then I have an advanced reader copy of. Haven't read it yet, but I am so looking forward to seeing more people in the community. There's Zoe Castile, and like there's so many names. And what I love is that now I'm sort of getting to the point where I can't remember everybody who's part of the community, which is where we want to be. We want to be at the point where there are many, many names that I can share. So I'm excited about the people who we are seeing, and the people who are starting to tell their stories. I did not, when I was reading romance as a teenager, I didn't have many Latinx romance writers that I was aware of, and or that I read. And so kind of being on the shelf with all of these writers is it's just, it's wonderful. And seeing and going to an independent bookstore or going to a Barnes and Noble and seeing their books on the shelves. I just picked up, Adriana Herrera has a Harlequin Desire that just came out, and it's part of like this sort of Dominican telenovela family, and it's a fantastic like premise. And I saw it at a Barnes and Noble, and she had given me I don't think it was an advanced reader's copy. I think it was just a copy. I went and got it anyway, even though I have one, because I was like, I want the experience of picking up this Harlequin with Adriana Herrera's name on it. And it was just a wonderful thing. So to say that I am, excited is an understatement.
Yay. Let's see, we've got a few more on the sheet here, but I want to make sure that folks who came to the live event have a chance to chime in with any questions. So I'm going to make it so that you can unmute yourself if you want to jump in with a question, or again, the chat box is still open. And let's see, what books or authors do you recommend that the people here check out next? Do you have any like favorite recommendations?
Well, I would say there's so much going on. I mean, like I have stuff behind me. I would say if you haven't read Olivia Dade, absolutely you should be reading Olivia Dade. She has a huge backlist too. So if you like her work, you will be able to devour all of the books that she's written, and there's plenty. And she's got another book that's coming out in November called All the Feels. And that one, I do believe, has gotten a couple of starred reviews already. And I have no doubt that it's going to be fantastic. Alexis Daria, I did read A Lot Like Adios, which comes out in September. It is fantastic. It is also the recipient of 4-star reviews. So Booklist, Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, and I'm forgetting Library Journal. It's all starred reviews, and so well deserved. I read it and just thought it was so fantastic. She's incredibly talented, and everybody should be reading her too. Tracy Livesey, who is on my shelf as well. These are her 2 latest books, Like Lovers Do and Sweet Talkin' Lover. She writes incredibly strong female main characters who I just always fall in love with. And I just think Like Lovers Do is kind of, when we were talking about craft books, if you're interested in romance and you're interested in writing romance, I highly recommend you read Like Lovers Do, because I feel like it is a textbook example of an exquisitely just like well-written romance. So those are my current, and then I'm reading this one now. It's an advanced reader's copy of It Takes Heart by Tiff Marcello. And this one comes out next week. And I am loving this. And this is going to be part of a series. Tiff Marcello, the family and Tiff Marcello are Filipino American, and the family name is the Busos, and they are trying to remodel and reopen this resort on the Outer Banks. And this is a second chance romance. And it is the start of this series. And I'm already kind of like, who's next? Who's next? I'm like really, really like into this. So I would definitely recommend this. And that comes out next week. So
Definitely
I
get
could
your
go
whole.
on and on and on.
Oop, we had a question pop up here. Who
Okay.
was the second author? They were trying to write down all the names that you said.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. Who did I said Alexis, and I said
Olivia Dade?
Olivia Dade was I think Olivia Dade was the first author I said, and then I said Alexis. I can show you.
Daria?
I'm reading these books.
Yes.
Alexis Daria. And I mean, these covers are fantastic, right? So
I love how much more creative the
recommend.
publishing industry has gotten with the romance covers, that they're like so many striking variations now.
I like all kinds of covers. I like clinch covers. I like this sort of kiss on the forehead. I like the illustrated covers. I think like there's room in romance for all of these covers. So I'm really excited just to see kind of the point where romance has everything for everyone, including the covers.
Yes. Yeah. There was a period there where it felt like everything was just like a headless woman. And it was like, okay.
Or a chest.
Yes.
It was a chest. I don't mind a chest.
Let's see. What can you share about your next book?
Let's see. The Wedding Crasher is I like to call it a ride. It is a fake dating romance, and it involves Dean, who is the best friend of Max. So if you haven't read The Worst Best Man, Max is the male protagonist, and his best friend is Dean. And Dean was a fan favorite. I did not intend to write a book about Dean until I wrote The Worst Best Man, and I was like, he's coming off the page, and I have a sense of who he is and what's holding him back. And he just seemed like an intriguing character enough that I was like, okay, I'm gonna write his story next. And luckily, readers seem to be happy about that too. So they're like, Dean gets his story next, yay! So I'm glad that I called that early. But the story is Dean is a lawyer in the DC area. I don't know where I might have gotten some inspiration for that. And he is on the cusp of partnership at the law firm where he works. He is also going to get married. The day of his wedding, someone who is the female protagonist, her name is Solange, sees something that suggests that perhaps Dean shouldn't get married. She ends up stopping the wedding, and that's precisely what happens. Why? Because it's a romance, and obviously the people who need to get together are Solange and Dean, right? But Dean is on the cusp of partnership, and because of that, he is concerned about getting all of the opportunities that are associated with him, sort of closing the deal on partnership. And one of the things that he's worried about is that there is an opportunity to kind of woo somebody in to the firm, and because he's not attached to anyone, the firm doesn't think he needs to be involved in those sort of social events or part of the recruitment process. And he kind of blurts out that he actually has a girlfriend, discovered on the day of his wedding that the person who he had been living with was really the person that he loved. And then blurts out that Solange is that person. And then he begs her to pretend to be his girlfriend for purposes of just recruiting this person. And from there, it goes on a wild ride. And it's a journey. They go on a journey, but it's a fun one, I think. And I'm really happy with how the story turned out.
Okay, I'm really excited. I love fake relationships. So
Oh,
great setup.
I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Let's see. Have you ever considered writing a different genre altogether?
I have. In my mind, like maybe one of these days I'd be interested in writing what I think is described as women's fiction, kind of something that is more closely tracking the female protagonist's journey. And not so much the romance, but more so her kind of personal growth. I have some ideas for stories that I think would be interesting in that vein. And I also think I wouldn't put it past me to at some point attempt a legal thriller. Just because I used to read a lot of legal thrillers and love them. And I have the legal background, but certainly not in criminal law, but I think it would be interesting to do sort of, something that is a legal thriller, and kind of, see where that goes. I was also like, I had my Sidney Sheldon moment as well. And so I kind of, to this day, I'm kind of like, I can do something like that. And I still remember Sidney Sheldon kind of taking me on a ride in one of the books. I'm trying to think of the title, but I'm that person who cannot be tricked. I know, who the villain is. I know like what the big twist is, except for this one book. I have to get the name of it, where I was just like, I can't believe it. And it like so affected me. I was like, gosh, I didn't see it coming. That was so freaking masterful. So yeah.
I love it. Let's see, is there anything else that you haven't had a chance to say that you'd like to share with everyone?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I can always find something to say, but I will say this. We are in, as many of you know, and are obviously experiencing in the midst of a global pandemic. And one of the things that I have been so appreciative of is that during this time, I've gotten so many messages from readers saying that The Worst Best Man kind of gave them the escape that they needed, that they were really dealing with a rough time. And for the time that they were reading the book, they just forgot kind of what was happening around them. And that to me is something that I did not expect to experience. It's a really powerful thing, to know that romance novels, which are often viewed as kind of the sort of very low on the literary totem pole, but to really experience and see and hear firsthand that these books really do make a difference in people's lives. And I know they've made a difference in my life. I will never forget being in the hospital when a family member was in the hospital, and getting through that by listening to a romance. And it was so comforting. And so I appreciate readers who love romance novels, who shout it from the rooftops, and even those who are very quiet about it, but nevertheless appreciate the genre, because I certainly do. And, if you are not a romance reader, that is perfectly fine, but I guarantee you that there is a story in the romance community that will satisfy you. You may not have found your person, but there are so many incredible romance writers writing all kinds of romance that you will find a story that you love. It's like 100% guarantee.
Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. This was so much fun.
Yes.
And you did a great job.